I want to bring in somebody who's going to give us his assessment of just how serious this threat is against us. Joining us now is David Gartenstein-Ross. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and a professor in Georgetown University's Security Studies program. David is also the author of Bin Laden's Legacy, Why We're Still Losing the War on Terror. Okay, that's a perfect segue into the question I'm about to ask you, David. We have John Brennan, CIA director, going before Congress and saying, we are concerned about, this was just in the past couple of weeks, we're concerned about the use of Syrian territory by the al-Qaeda organization to recruit individuals and develop the capability to be not just carrying out attacks inside of Syria, but also to use Syria as a launching pad. I know no one wants us to land the 101st Airborne in Syria. Isn't this the nightmare scenario, though? This becomes essentially like in Afghanistan on the Mediterranean, and there will be bombings in New York City or D.C. or elsewhere in this country.
I'd definitely compare it to Afghanistan, and not so much to Afghanistan pre-9/11, where you had a safe haven that al-Qaeda enjoyed under the Taliban's rule, but rather to Afghanistan during the 1980s, during the Afghan-Soviet War. Both of them are very similar in that you have wars that are major humanitarian catastrophes. The wars, that is, on the side of the violent non-state actors, are very popular throughout the Muslim world. It was very popular in the 1980s to fight against the Soviets. Right now it's very popular in general to fight against Assad, although that breaks along sectarian lines. And furthermore, both wars, both jihads, had major theological legitimacy by mainstream clerics. I think that, in fact, the impact of this conflict will be greater than the impact of the Afghan-Soviet War because of how central Syria is to the Middle East, as opposed to Afghanistan, which was remote.
David, this is Michelle Field here. I have a question. The extremists that have left Pakistan and Afghanistan to go to Syria, do we know the level of experience and skills they have? Do they have the ability to launch an attack on the U.S., or are their skills, are they more of a low-level al-Qaeda members?
They've been high-level individuals. The two individuals who are known to have been affiliated with al-Qaeda senior leadership, both of whom are now dead, actually, are Abu Khalid al-Suri and also Sanafi Nasser. Both of them, as I said, recently were killed, but were high level within the organization. Both of their roles were not so much planning attacks against the West, but in the case of Abu Khalid al-Suri, he was there as a representative. He was part of a group that normally isn't considered to be one of the big al-Qaeda groups in Syria. The group is called Ahrar al-Sham, and the reason why I mentioned that it's not considered to be a big al-Qaeda group in general is because it gives you just a sense of how much they've been able to infiltrate multiple factions, not just factions like Jabhat al-Nusra, which is recognized as an AQ affiliate, but also other factions as well, which are sometimes described as moderate Salafi factions. Now, according to the New York Times and the article that Buck mentioned earlier, you have not just individuals who are acting as emissaries, but also those who bring critical skills, including bomb-making skills and the like. However, other than the individuals that I mentioned and a small handful of others, the actual identity of most of the people who've gone from Pakistan to Syria is not known based on open source reporting.
So the question for the table is, how far are we away from a potential nuclear bomb going off in New York City? But more specifically, what is the state of jihad as it stands right now? If we take David's analogy that this is more like Afghanistan of the 1980s, what I would ask this, does that not mean the threat isn't immediate? In other words, it's a little longer range. Afghanistan of the 1980s was concerned with the Soviet Union and an internal skirmish there, as opposed to exporting jihad, right? Where we not see Syria now as concerned with its local interest to fight against Assad, so therefore any type of exporting terrorism would be after the resolution of this civil war.
We're trying to gauge where it is on that timeline. I think that's a fair way to look at it. But in that effort, for example, I could pull up a number of headlines, and these are just from the past couple of days on Long War Journal, which does a very good job of looking into the jihad when other media outlets aren't. And you have, for example, that the former head of al-Qaeda's network in Iran now operates in Syria. And an al-Nusra Front video features veteran al-Qaeda military leader, al-Nusra Front being their AQ affiliate in Syria. Ansar Jerusalem, which operates in the Sinai area of Egypt, confirms deaths of 6 members, 2 tied to Syria conflict. Chechen commander for al-Nusra Front reported killed in fighting against Syrian forces. This is a... I'm just going to say that this has now become the fly trap for all, well, I shouldn't say fly trap, because because they're not all going down. The point is, at some point, they may have created a statelet, enough space, a safe haven to operate out of there, even if they don't beat Assad. They don't have to win, they just have to have a stalemate.
Moss to a flame right now, clearly in Syria, but the focus seems to be on in Syria.
Yes, and the larger question here is this a result of lack of leadership on the United States' part way before it got to this point, because, drawing the false red line and, not standing up to Russia? It's created now a petri dish for for possible export of terrorism, and I think Obama should be worrying about a nuclear bomb going off in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, given the type of people and their proximity to Israel over here, than maybe in the United States right now.
Yeah, so to that point, if you look at what Obama said, I don't think this was an accident. He says they pose the #1 national security threat to the United States. He's talking about Russia. He's still hurt over the Romney comment. He clearly wants people to know that he's done a good job.
And he's right, and Romney's wrong.
Right, on terrorism, and that Russia is not such a big threat. The question is, have we got ourselves into a position, and I identify with an awful lot of the so-called isolationist sentiment, but have we got ourselves into a position where we have believed the administration when it says that it has Al-Qaeda on the run, when it hasn't?
Well, when you look at the news cycle just over the past couple of weeks, no one is even, it's like the Syrian civil war has ended. Meanwhile, we know that the New York Times is finally saying there's more Al-Qaeda guys coming there than at any point previously. David, I want to go to you with on this notion of whether it's moths to a flame or flypaper, if you will, or actually just a beehive that's about to explode. We're taking this analogy kind of far. But we know that there are Americans, there are Europeans, there are Westerners who may have what we call clean skins, meaning their passports don't necessarily come up in FBI databases. They could come back and wage jihad at home. Isn't that, in fact, very likely, given that they are getting the training, the expertise, and the indoctrination in the Syrian battlefield?
Yeah, a small percentage of those who go and fight are likely to come back and actually try to carry out terrorist attacks. But while I say it's a small percentage, when you look at the sheer numbers who've gone over, according to the International Center for the Study of Radicalization, there have been about 1,800 Western Europeans who've gone over. I was living last year in the Netherlands at a time when they found that more than 100 young Dutch Muslims had gone over. So the sheer numbers means that even if the percentages are small, the risk is there. And you just had the second plot emanating from Syria that was disrupted today in France. Fortunately, neither of them have succeeded. I don't know that either of them were directed by organizations, but when people have gone over, gotten battlefield experience, and come back perhaps radicalized, that does pose a risk.
Now, of course, all this is premised on the likelihood that if there was a nuclear bomb in New York City, if that did happen, that, of course, there may be a jihadist hand behind it, which is a leap that I think we're willing to make for now. David, thank you for your insight.
My pleasure.